Perfect. All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. My name is Brian, and I will be assisting you with the advanced training within DoorLoop. We're going to go ahead and give it a few more seconds here to see if there's anybody else that still needs to join. While we go ahead and wait on them, I will just give you a brief overview as to what we're going to talk about today. The advanced training within DoorLoop will go over the accounting and the bookkeeping and reporting side of DoorLoop as well. So we will talk about setting your starting balances for your bank accounts. We will go ahead and talk about management fees for those of you that do property management for other owners. We will go over expenses, and we will also go over owner distributions along with reporting. For any questions that you may have, please try to hold off until the end of today's meeting to go ahead and ask them, as we will have about 10 minutes or so to have a Q&A session towards the end. But if you do have any urgent questions in between, I do have a support agent in here on the chat that can go ahead and answer them. You can go ahead and type them in there, and she'll go ahead and respond as quickly as she can. So to begin on here, for your accounting journey within DoorLoop, the very first thing that we want to make sure is completely set up are the bank accounts that you are planning on using within DoorLoop. In order to go ahead and access the bank accounts that you already have within DoorLoop, you're going to head over to the left-hand side to your accounting portion, and you're going to jump into your transactions tab. Now, within here, you will see all the bank accounts that you have added so far. If you have been doing these sessions with an implementation specialist, then you should have the bank accounts in here at least that currently receive rent payments. If you do have any other bank accounts that are used for operating purposes, for holding security deposits, for reserve funds, or for anything else such as credit cards or anything of that sort, then those need to be added as well. And the way that you would do that is by jumping into the top right where it says new account. And on here, you can go ahead and label these accounts however you'd prefer. So for example, if I have an account that I know holds all reserve funds, and I can just go ahead and name it such, or I can name it security deposits or operating, whatever you would like. For any situations where we're adding credit cards, we want to be sure that we swap the type on here instead of asset bank to liability credit card. All right. But aside from that, if it's just a bank account, you go ahead and leave it as such on here. You go ahead and click save at the bottom right. And now that account has been added. You want to repeat this process until you've added all the bank accounts that have property-related transactions within DoorLoop. Now, following that, in order to make sure that you have a successful journey on the accounting side of DoorLoop, we must first talk about setting your starting balances within here. And the way that you will do that is by navigating over to the appropriate bank account, and you'll go ahead and select this option that I'm currently highlighting in red that says Set Opening Balance. So when we go ahead and click into where it says Set Opening Balance, you will see that DoorLoop gives you a little startup wizard for setting opening balances. So what exactly does that mean within DoorLoop? Well, setting your opening balances is just a fancier way of saying setting your accounting start date. Now you will notice that DoorLoop will already recommend a date for you to start your accounting for. Typically, for example, if you were starting as of January 1st of 2025 within DoorLoop, and that's what you set as your DoorLoop start date, then DoorLoop will automatically recommend for that to be your accounting start date as well. It'll already be pre-filled. Now, when you go ahead and select that date on here, you're going to notice that the very next thing that DoorLoop asks you for is to put your account balance as of the previous day. So in this case, if I select January 1st of 2025, DoorLoop will ask me what my balance was in my bank account as of the day before. In this case, December 31st of 2024. I do recommend that you keep the date on there that DoorLoop suggests. Now, I will clarify that if you did receive any rent payments for the month that you're starting your accounting for in DoorLoop prior to this date, so for example, if I'm aiming for starting January 1st and I receive some January payments a little bit early, towards the end of December or so, it's very important to note that those payments must be logged as credits to the opening balance on the ledgers instead of payments. For more information on that, please go ahead and speak to your implementation specialist or go ahead and reach out through the chat box within our DoorLoop screen. Now, following that, once you input your balance on here, that part is good to go. Easy enough. Now, at the bottom here, this is where it does require a bit more explanation. So, DoorLoop's accounting system is a property-based accounting system, meaning that all transactions that you log within DoorLoop have to be associated to a property no matter what. So if you have money leaving your account, you have to say which property it's related to. If you have income and it's a lease payment, you have to log which lease it's for, and in turn, it already shows it on the property. Or if you have additional income towards the bank account, you have to go ahead and say which property that was for. Your opening balances are no different. When you set your starting balances within DoorLoop, you have to tell DoorLoop how much of that balance within that bank account belongs to each of your properties. Now, the biggest thing on here is to make sure that you first assign whatever balances you're currently holding within this account that are liabilities, such as security deposits and reserves. So if you are holding any deposits or any reserves within this account, you would go ahead and set them up to begin with. So for example, let's say that I was holding $10,000 total of security deposits within this account. $5,000 was for this property and $5,000 was for another property. Now, you will have a remaining balance. DoorLoop will not allow you to save your opening balances until you've assigned the entire bank balance that you have on here. It is very important to note that because DoorLoop is a property-based accounting system, that means that all the funds within your bank account should belong to the properties that you have in here. And maybe an easier way to think about this is if you have money that currently belongs to any of your owners, if you do property management, then that would be the easier way around. If you own the properties, then you must know how much of that balance within that bank account belongs to each of your properties. If you have any funds in here that don't belong to any of the properties that you have within DoorLoop, then it should not be within the system. For more information on how to go ahead and set these opening balances, despite having funds that don't belong to any of your properties that you're managing in here, please reach out to your implementation specialist or use the chat box within your DoorLoop screen to ensure that we can provide you with the right solution. After you've gone ahead and assigned the entire balance across the board, DoorLoop will go ahead and allow you to close out your opening balances. And you can click Save at the bottom right. Now, I do want to clarify that if you set your opening balances and at some point in time you feel like they need to be switched up because you felt like it was done incorrectly, you can always go ahead, click on the three dots on the right, click Edit on that account, and you can come back to your opening balances section on the left and you can select click here to make any adjustments to that. Now, you will notice that the menu switches up a little bit, so it's not going to be as user-friendly as it was at first, but you will go ahead and be able to make those adjustments on here easily. If you needed to add more properties to that section to divide the balances by, you can always add line items within here and do it on there. Again, for any assistance on how to switch this up, you can always reach out to your support team. Now, after we've gone ahead and set the opening balances, we're going to go ahead and talk about how to go ahead and set management fees. So if you do property management for other owners, then it's very important that you go ahead and set your management fees in here. In order to successfully set your management fees in here, you first have to add your property management company as a vendor within DoorLoop. The way to do that is going to be by coming to the top left over here on this plus sign that you have, or better said, this Create New button, and clicking it. When you do so, you're going to get the option right here in this first column that says Vendor. When you select that, you can go ahead and fill out the information to assign your property management company in here. So for example, let's say that my property management company is called DoorLoop Property Management. By the way, when adding vendors into DoorLoop, you can go ahead and just put the company field. You don't have to fill in the first and last name if you have a company field instead, and vice versa. If you only have a first and last name, then you don't have to fill out the company name. We can go ahead and click Save. Now, following that, on the left-hand side, you're going to navigate towards the bottom to your settings. And once you jump into your settings, you're going to scroll towards the bottom of this screen, and you're going to see a section that says Management Fees at the bottom right. We're going to go ahead and click on that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and remove this one temporarily just so we can see a blank setup on here. So the very first thing we want to be sure of is that we select the appropriate vendor in here, which in this case should be the property management company that we just added together. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select DoorLoop Property Management because that's my management company in here. After you've gone ahead and done that, right here, DoorLoop will ask you to configure your management fees. So you can set up your management fees in 3 different ways within DoorLoop. When I select Add Fee, you're going to see 3 options on here. The very first option is going to be to do a percentage based off charges posted, or better said, on an accrual basis. So if you collect a percentage of management fees every month, despite whether or not you receive payments from your tenants, then you can go ahead and select accrual basis. This is more so in the case where even if the unit is vacant, the owner is still paying you for management fees during that span of time. If that's the case, you can go ahead and select percentage of charges posted. Now, if you collect a percentage based off of payments received from your tenants, meaning that if you don't receive any payment from them, you won't collect a management fee, then you would select the second option that says percentage of payments received. And if you do have a flat fee instead for certain properties, then you can just go ahead and select flat fee. My recommendation on here is going to be for you to select the structure that you use the most across the board for all your properties. So assuming that I have about 50 properties within DoorLoop, and for about 30 of them, I use a percentage-based fee, then I can go ahead and select percentage of payments received. On the right, DoorLoop will ask you what your percentage you collect is. So in this case, I'll say that I collect 10%. Following that, DoorLoop is going to go ahead and ask me, what do I collect 10% of? So you're going to scroll down and you're going to say that you collect 10% of rent collected. And towards the right, for the expense category, you're going to select management fees because that is exactly the type of expense that is occurring against that property. Now, if you only collect 10% of rent, you can go ahead and save this as it is, and you are good to go. But if there is anything else that the tenants pay that you collect a portion of, such as pet fees, late fees, or anything of that sort, then you need to add them as well. So for example, let's say that you collect 50% of the late fees that come through. You can go ahead and add another fee right under, and you can go ahead and decide to do the exact same setup. The only thing that will change here is going to be the fee because you collect half of them, meaning that you collect 50% of late fees over here. And on the left, instead of selecting rent, you're going to go ahead and select late fees instead, which if we scroll down, we'll be able to find it on here. And the expense category will still fall under the same one, which is management fees. And then with this, we are saying that you are collecting 10% of rent and half of all late fees that come through. Now, let's say that instead of collecting 50%, you keep all late fees that come through. Or let's say that you also keep application fees that come through for any sort of rental applications that you decide to do through DoorLoop. Fantastic. You have a section down here that says Setup Payout Categories. Payout categories within DoorLoop, as it says in this first sentence right here, just designates which payouts are retained entirely by your business, meaning that you keep 100% of those fees. So when you click on Add Account on here, DoorLoop will ask you which type of income account you collect 100% for. So if we scroll down on here, we're going to see the example for late fees. So I can select that I keep 100% of late fees that come through. And if you also keep application fees as an example, then if you scroll down, you can select application fees as well. So with this, we're saying that I collect 10% of rent and I keep all late fees and application fees that get paid on those properties. And with this, we can go ahead and click Save. Now, after doing this, you are not done. You've gone ahead and set a structure for management fees, but they have not been assigned to your properties just yet. The easiest way for you to assign these management fees across the board to all your properties at once is going to be by jumping to the left-hand side in your reports area. And if you go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of your business overview reports, you will see an option that says Management Fees Settings Report. I would recommend that we favorite this report so that it pops up to the top of your list. And now you don't have to scroll again in order to find them. Now, clicking into this report, you will notice that you're going to see a list of all your properties in here. Now, by default, they shouldn't have any active management fees at all. This is going to be blank, but let's go ahead and say that most of my properties use that 10% structure that I just set up. I can go ahead and select this checkbox to select all my properties and then go down the line and deselect the properties that do not use this 10%, leaving only the properties that do use this 10% instead. After doing so, you will see an option up top that says Edit Management Fees. When clicking on that, you will go ahead and see that this pops up over here, a toggle that's off for enabling management fees. You want to be sure to enable those. And you leave the first option on that says Use Company Default Management Fee Structure. This means that all the properties that are currently selected will use the 10% that we just set up. So when we click Save on here, DoorLoop will go ahead and assign management fees in bulk across the board to your properties. Now, let's go ahead and say that the remaining properties that I did not select, instead of using 10%, use 8%. All I have to do is select those remaining properties in here, which I will do so right now, and select Edit Management Fees at the top. Once we do so, you're going to see the same exact menu that you saw before, but now you're going to select Specify Management Fee Structure for this property. When you do so, your current structure that you had set up by default will pop up, and you can go ahead and change it. So now when we click on this arrow to extend the menu, I can swap the fee for these properties. So these will use an 8% structure instead. Now, it's very important to note that if you are going to be setting a percentage-based management fee structure, you do need to have payments recorded on your leases before the management fees populate on the menu. If you have no payments received, they will not pop up. This will not be the case for any properties that you have flat fees for, as DoorLoop automatically just runs the bills for those flat fees instead. So in this case, for the sake of the example, I'm going to say that these properties use a flat fee structure instead of the percentage-based structure. When I go ahead and click Save at the bottom right, now these 7 properties on here will only use the flat fee that I just set. And you can tell because the properties that I selected from this one down are all checked off for cash basis, meaning that I'm doing it based off of a percentage, whereas these first 7 are using a flat fee instead. All right. Now, after you've gone ahead and set your management fees, you want to go ahead and make sure that you actually know how to run your management fee bills within DoorLoop. And the easiest way to do so, and the most direct way, is going to be by clicking on this plus sign at the top left where it says Create New. And after you've gone ahead and clicked on that, you will see the option down here that says Management Fees. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it for you guys right there. We're going to go ahead and click on that. When you open up your management fees menu on here, it will go ahead and show you all the properties that you currently have management fees set for. Let me go ahead and remove this. There we go. So it'll show you all the properties that you have management fees set for. Now, again, as I mentioned, for any of the properties that you have a percentage-based fee, you need to make sure that payments have been logged towards them, or else when you come into this menu over here, it won't show a fee being calculated. That's because payments haven't been recorded on those leases. So please make sure this is your way to troubleshoot and make sure that everything has been correctly recorded. Now, for any of your properties that have a flat fee structure or payments have been recorded, then they will have the fees populate in this area. Now, they won't be selected by default. DoorLoop gives you the chance to go ahead and select which properties you want to go ahead and run management fees for. The most important thing you want to be sure is set correctly when you're within this page is the time period as to when it's calculating your management fees for. Typically, by default, DoorLoop defaults to last month instead. So you want to be sure you either swap it to this month or to whatever time period you run your management fees for. So if you do it from the first of the month to the end of the month, you can do that. If you do it from the 15th to the 15th, you can also do that. It's entirely up to you. Now, after you've gone ahead and done that, you're going to select all the properties you want to run management fees for. Now, you will notice that for any of the properties that I go ahead and select that don't have a fee calculated on here, even if I do click Create Bills at the bottom right, which is your next step, it won't actually create bills for those properties. It'll only do it for the ones that did have funds available to run the management fees for. So in this case, it's running it for all my properties that I had a flat fee for. After you've gone ahead and click Create Bills, right next to that, or right after that, better said, you will click Pay Bills. When you click Pay Bills, DoorLoop will open up this following menu on here. What this menu is showing you are all the properties that you were trying to run the management fee bills for. Now, what's important to note on this page is that DoorLoop is letting you know whether or not your property has enough funds available to actually pay out those management fees. So, for example, on this first property and these last 3, I haven't recorded much payments towards them or enough income towards them in order to actually pay out for management fees. So by default, the system is telling me that I don't have enough funds to pay them out. If this is something that you would like to override and you will fix later on, you absolutely can override it. You would just turn off this toggle that says automatically apply payments. You select edit and you can go ahead and fill in the amount for the whole bill. So in this case, I'm going to say that I'm overriding it and I am paying the full $300 against that property. And now it populates in that area. For any of your properties that did have enough funds, as you can see, it did it automatically. You do not have to worry about it. By clicking next on here, it'll take me to the following page, and all the properties that are showing up are the ones that had enough funds to actually pay out those bills. So as you can see, I have 3 properties that I can go ahead and pay out management fees for. On here, in the payment method dropdown, you're going to go ahead and select how it is that you pay yourself out. So if you transfer the money over because it's within your same banking institution, you can swap it over to EFT. If you cut yourself a check, you can go ahead and select check instead. By the way, my biggest recommendation is to consolidate those payments using this toggle that you have at the top right. By consolidating them, it makes it one big payment towards you, but DoorLoop still understands that it's different allocations per property. So if you cut yourself a check, you can select check on here. If you would like to use DoorLoop to send out the payment from your primary account that receives rents into another account, you can also select ePay. And DoorLoop will use our outgoing payment system, Checkbook.io, in order to push out those funds to whatever other account you would like. After you've gone ahead and recorded how you pay yourself out, in this case, let's say that I cut myself a check and I did it outside of DoorLoop already, so I have the check number on here, you're going to click Finish at the bottom right. By doing so, you've gone ahead and recorded management fees against all those properties. So now when you go into your reporting, you will see the income for those properties and the expenses for management fees against them. Currently at this point in time, so far so good. After that, we can click on this X. Now, before we go ahead and move forward with owner distributions or anything of that sort, it is very important to note that you first must record any expenses that occurred in between. And this is going to be a useful tool for those of you that own properties as well within DoorLoop. Expenses are universal. So let's go ahead and click on the plus sign at the top left. And once again, within this same area that I marked earlier, now you have your expense feature at the bottom right. When we go ahead and select expense within DoorLoop, the very first thing the system is going to ask you is to select the payee. So who it is that I paid out for this expense. So when you click on this drop down, it'll give you 3 options on here to add a new vendor, add a new owner, or add a new tenant if that person is not in the system. But for example, let's say that my vendor is already in here. I can either type it in at the top to go ahead and locate them, or I can look through my list of vendors on here. And if they're not populating all of them, I can click show more results and it'll show more of them on here. So let's go ahead and say that I had an expense towards the electric company. When I go ahead and select that, DoorLoop is going to ask me if this was a one-time expense or if I want to set up a recurring expense. If you do decide to go the route of setting recurring expenses, you just want to be sure that you select the appropriate start date on here. So assuming it occurs starting February 1st. And if it has an end date, you can specify it. If this is going to continue, then you can go ahead and select repeat forever, and it won't let you select an end date because it's assuming it'll continue until you decide to mark it as ended. And you have the frequency of that expense on here. So if this is something that occurs every week, 2 weeks, monthly, every 2 months, quarterly, so on and so forth, you can adjust it to your liking. Now, coming back to the one-time expense, it'll autofill to today's date. If you had any expenses that occurred maybe a week ago or a couple of days ago, you can always backdate it. It's okay. You click on this calendar and you select which day it was for. Now, following that, DoorLoop will go ahead and ask you which account the expense came out of. So in this case, let's go ahead and say that this came out of the DoorLoop rental income account on here. And then on the right, it's asking me the payment method that I used in order to actually pay out that expense. So on here, you will be able to select which one is correct for your bookkeeping purposes. So if you went ahead and cut a check towards this specific vendor, then you can go ahead and either print out the check directly through DoorLoop if you haven't paid them out yet. If you have, you can disable the toggle and just log the check number on here. Following that, as I mentioned earlier, when setting your opening balances within DoorLoop, you want to be sure that you always assign this expense towards the right property. So in this case, let's go ahead and say that this expense was meant to go towards this property on here. Now, if you have multiple units within this property and it was a unit-specific expense, you can click on the drop-down for unit and select from the list of different units on here. But if it was a general expense for that property and it doesn't pertain to a specific unit, then you don't have to select the unit from this drop-down. You can leave it blank. Following that, you have to categorize the expense correctly. When clicking on this drop-down, you will go ahead and notice that right here, where I'm marking in this red box, DoorLoop will let you know what category of accounts you are selecting from currently. So at the moment, when you open up this dropdown, you will see that the very first category is going to be asset. As you scroll down, it'll change from asset to equity. And after equity, you have expense. You want to be sure that when logging expenses within DoorLoop, you select an account that is under this expense category that you're seeing. Now, you will see a preset list of accounts that exist when you first sign up to DoorLoop or as you've been using the system. But if for whatever reason you don't see the correct category on here, you can always scroll to the top and select Create New Account right under the expense category over here. And you can name it whatever you'd like instead. And once you create that account, it will forever be in DoorLoop, so you don't have to create it anymore. You can always just select it from the list that currently exists. So in this case, because this was an electric expense, I can go ahead and scroll down a little bit on here and just select Utilities Electric. And we are good to go. And I can say paying electric bill for January 2025. And on the right, I can put the amount for the expense that I paid out. So let's say that I paid $200. Now, before I close this out and mark it as an expense, keep in mind that if you have an expense towards the same vendor, but it was for multiple properties, you can always click Add Line Item right here and add multiple expenses or multiple line items within the same expense. So if this was a $200 bill, but it was split between two properties, 100 and 100, you can always select a different one and go across the board and put the same information. If it is the same information and just a different property, then you have this feature right next to the amount box that lets you duplicate the line item. By doing so, it'll create an identical line item, and you can go ahead and just select the different property it was for. And you're good. And just make sure the amounts are swapped as well. Perfect. Once we go ahead and click Save at the bottom right, DoorLoop has now recorded that expense against that property. So at this point in time, we've accurately set opening balances. We've accurately set the management fees, and we've accurately set expenses. Now, following that, we want to be sure that we run owner distributions correctly so that the reporting side of DoorLoop is correct as well. So how do you do that within the system? At the top left, once again, as you guys can see, this Create New button is going to be very useful throughout your DoorLoop journey. You will see an owner distribution box. And again, I will go ahead and mark it in red to make it easier right over here. So once we go ahead and select owner distribution, DoorLoop is going to ask if you would like to run an owner distribution for all your properties at once. If you do all your owner distributions on the same day, or if you'd like to try to run them on the same day, then you can just leave all properties on. If you're trying to do it for some, you can click on some and just select your certain group of properties on here. The other option you have is if you have portfolios that separate your properties in a specific way, then you can select by portfolio instead. You have either option on here. Now, after we go ahead and continue on this next screen, you will notice that DoorLoop may give you this screen that we're seeing. Now, the reason why I say that it may is because it doesn't do it all the time. The only instance where DoorLoop would stop you on this page is to notify you of three different things. One, that you haven't assigned owners to your properties. In order to run an owner distribution, an owner must be assigned no matter what. So if you haven't assigned them, this is your opportunity to click Missing Info. And on there, you can add an owner from the existing list that you have, or you can click New Owner and add them directly through here. Following that, the other reason why it may stop you is if you have not set any opening balances towards this property. Now, I will clarify that if this is the only reason why you can't move forward from the screen, then you must go ahead and make sure that you set the opening balances just to be safe. But DoorLoop will not stop you. It's just advising you that you do have to set your opening balances for this property. The other reason why DoorLoop may stop you is if you have any undeposited funds towards this property, whether it be a manual payment that you marked as undeposited or an online payment that has not hit your bank account yet. According to DoorLoop's accounting system, it believes that you don't have enough funds to actually distribute just yet because they haven't hit your bank account. So you want to be sure that this gets marked as deposited before you can actually run your distributions. Now, if you would like to temporarily remove these properties from your list of distributions, you can. You have the option on the right to click Remove from Distribution, and it will remove it from the screen. So let's go ahead and remove all these properties so we can go ahead and run the owner distributions correctly for the correct properties on here. There we go. And just to show you guys an example that opening balances doesn't stop you, if I were to click here, DoorLoop will ask you, are you sure that you want to continue? Basically seeing that you haven't set opening balances towards it, but if you'd like to continue, you can. Now, following that, you will see a list of all the properties that you currently have within DoorLoop. Now, for any of your properties that do have enough funds to distribute, they will automatically be selected on the left-hand side. So just as an example, for the sake of this video, they will be selected by default with these check marks. And on the right, it'll tell you how much the distribution amount is for. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and put that I am distributing this amount for this property. Perfect. Now, I do want to clarify that for this example, I am manually inputting the amount that I'm distributing. DoorLoop calculates this for you automatically, so you do not have to do this. The system will automatically detect that you've received your rent income and that you've subtracted your management fees plus the expenses that you had against those properties. So your distribution amount on the right will be correct if you've been doing your accounting correctly so far. This also serves as a useful page to make sure that if something seems off about the distribution amount, that you go back to your opening balances and make sure everything was set correctly. So, for example, if I were to look at this property over here that says that the available funds are negative 175, when I click onto it, it'll go ahead and let me know why that is. So right now it just says negative cash balance. That just means that maybe there's expenses against that property with no income recorded. But if the reason why it's at a negative is because of security deposits not being logged towards the opening balances, or reserve not being logged in the opening balances, or any undeposited funds, it will clarify it on here. Now, after you've gone ahead and selected all the properties that you want to run your distributions for, you will click Next on the screen. Now, when you move to this following screen, DoorLoop will give you an order of the owners that you're distributing funds to. Now, by default, on the right-hand side, if you click on this arrow, the drop-down will show you the payment method that you're using to pay out these owners. If you are using one of these options outside of DoorLoop, so you're giving them cash, you're cutting them a check, you're just transferring them the money, whatever the case may be, then you can select the appropriate payment method on here. If you are using DoorLoop instead, you will see an additional option above cash that says ePay. And if you select ePay, that will go ahead and let you pay out your owners directly through DoorLoop. And just to clarify, if you do have that outgoing payments method set up, then it will default to that payment method whenever you go ahead and try to run your owner distributions within here. So you just want to be sure you go down the line and the correct payment method is selected for each of your owners on here. And afterwards, you can click Finish at the bottom right. Now, by doing so, you have gone ahead and completed your entire monthly cycle. So you've gone ahead and recorded management fees, you've recorded all the expenses against your properties, and now you've gone ahead and recorded the owner distributions as well. After you've done so, DoorLoop will go ahead and ask you if you want to view your transactions report or view an owner statement. So just to go ahead and clarify and show you some of the reporting side of DoorLoop, let's jump into it. So you want to make sure that you navigate on the left-hand side to your reports. Now, by default, I will go ahead and remove these just to show you what you will see whenever you jump into the reporting area for the first time. The main reports that you will see on this list, assuming that we already came in here and favorited the management fees settings report, are going to be these four over here. Now, these four reports that you see at the top, balance sheet, cash flow statement, owner statement, and profit and loss, are some of the most common reports that people ask for, especially when DoorLoop is being sold to you for the very first time. So your balance sheet is going to go ahead and show you pretty much balances across the board for each of your bank accounts. So for all your asset accounts, better said, any undeposited funds you have, any liabilities you currently have, equity, equity return earnings, expenses, so on and so forth. So this is going to show you balances across the board. Now, following that, you will have cash flow statement. So a cash flow statement will show you the movement of funds within a specific time period. So for example, for this month, January 1st to the end of January, you will notice that DoorLoop shows you a list of all your income versus all the expenses. And again, any sort of owner distributions that you've done and anything of that sort. And reserves at the bottom again, undeposited funds, so on and so forth. Your profit and loss will strictly show you income versus expenses. So it's not going to show you balances for any of your asset accounts or your bank accounts that you have within DoorLoop. It will not show you any liabilities that you're currently holding, like any security deposits or reserve funds, and it won't show you any equity transactions, so any owner distributions or any owner contributions. This is strictly going to be income versus expenses on this list. Now, moving forward, for those of you using DoorLoop for property management purposes, you will see an owner statement. I will let you know that the cash flow statement and the owner statement are pretty much the exact same thing, but the owner statement is just a cleaner view for your owners to see. Now, if you have invited your owners to the portal, then they will be able to access the portal on their end and view this report without you having to send it out to them. But if you do want to go ahead and generate this report just to make sure that everything looks good, or to make sure that you can download it and send it out to them, you can. You just want to be sure that you select the right time period that you're looking at the accounting for that property for. And on the right, you want to be sure you select the correct owner. So in this case, if I were to select myself for this month of January, I would go ahead and click Run Report. And now DoorLoop is going to show me all the movement that I've had for those specific properties. So in this case, I have an example on here for this property. I've collected a total of $10 for rent, and I had an expense for management fees, which was 10% of that amount. In this case, it was $1. And as you can see at the bottom, I had an owner distribution for that property for the remaining amount. So I had a $9 distribution out to the owner. So towards the bottom, it will go ahead and show you the cash available. Ideally, you would want your cash available to show 0 at the bottom. That's how the owner knows that currently you are not holding on to any funds that belong to them and everything has been dispersed. If you see that it's at a negative, that means that there were more expenses than planned for that property. So the next time that you receive income for the following month, it'll just go ahead and deduct it from the following month's distribution on there. Now, if this should not be showing a negative, then you want to make sure you go back into your transactions and your accounting and bookkeeping side of DoorLoop and just make sure that you can catch the transaction that made this go wrong. And at the bottom, your owners will be able to see a movement of the transactions that occurred. So the income for rent, the management fees that went out, the owner distributions that went out, so on and so forth. All right. Now, if this is a report that you would like to go ahead and download or send out via email to your owners, you can. You have these two options right here next to the button that says Run Report. The option on the left will allow you to download it yourself, and you can go ahead and send it out via email outside of DoorLoop or anything like that. If you would like to use DoorLoop to send out the email directly through here, then you can just click on the second option on the right that says Send Report via email. Now, this is going to let you know if your owner currently has an email in the system or not. If they don't, you have to make sure that you update their email address on here. But if you do, it'll go ahead and let you click Send Now, and that will push out the owner statement directly to their email. And you can do this on a monthly basis if you would like to. Now, moving forward on here, if we click on this back arrow at the top left, we're going to have a few more reports that I'm going to recommend for you all to go ahead and favorite, despite whether or not you do property management for other owners or you own the properties that you currently have within DoorLoop. So the following reports I'm going to recommend are going to be, number one, ePay transactions on the left, transactions list by type on the right, and all of these AR reports that you're seeing. So AR aging detail, AR aging detail by account, and AR aging summary. Why is that? Well, once I've gone ahead and favorited them, you will notice that they will go to the top of the list. And actually, I do recommend the rent roll as well, just because this gives you general information about your portfolio across the board. So starting off with your AR reports, why do I feel like these are useful? Well, when we click into the AR aging detail, these reports show you money that is owed to you across the board. Now, the AR aging detail report will sort your money that's owed to you by property. So in this case, you can see everything that's owed to me for 100 Washington Avenue, and it'll show you a list of all the charges. Now, you will notice the only thing that this report does not show you is the reason for that charge. So it doesn't specify that it's a rent charge or a late fee charge or anything of that sort. It just knows that it's a charge that this lease and this unit currently owes you, and all the open balances across the board. As you scroll down on here, let me go ahead and find the following split for you guys to see. You will notice that the following property will show up afterwards. Let me go ahead and continue on here. So the following property on here will show you how much you're owed for that property and all the charges that are currently making up that amount. And then the following property, so on and so forth. So this will show you open balance by property across the board. Now coming back to your reports and scrolling to the top, you will see AR aging detail by account. This report will show you what the previous report didn't. So instead of this report sorting your owed funds to you by property, now it is sorting it by charge. So how much you're owed in total for this, how much you're owed in total for CAM charges, how much you're owed in total for HOA, for insurance, so on and so forth. So this will sort it by type of charge on here. But as you can see, you still have a column that tells you which property this is for, which lease owes you that amount, and how many days they've been past due, and of course the type of charge, which already tells you right here, and the amount for each individual charge on there as well. And then the next report, which is the AR aging summary report, this is a more useful report to keep in your back pocket. You're not going to be checking this one as frequently unless you have somebody that hasn't been paying you for a while. And the reason why I specify that is when you click AR aging summary, you will notice that what this report does is that it shows you how long somebody has owed you a balance. So you will notice that over here, anybody that has owed you within the last 30 days, based off the due date for your charges, they will be within the 0 to 30 day range. Anybody that has passed that time span will move in to the 31 to 60 day range, then 61 to 90, and then 91 plus, so on and so forth. So you will be able to see how long they've been owing you that balance. Now, coming back to your reports, you will have an ePay transactions report. Now, currently, if you jump into that report and you have online payments coming through on DoorLoop, you will notice that whenever you have online payments come into your bank account, they will deposit as lump sums. So it'll be multiple payments from your tenants coming in as one total amount. Now, of course, within DoorLoop, you are able to see that certain leases have been paid and the balances have been wiped. But if for your own purposes, you want to make sure that you know exactly what each lump sum deposit consists of, that's what the ePay transactions will be useful for. This will give you a breakdown. Let's say that you received a $10,000 deposit into your bank account from online payments. It'll let you know that it was actually split up into 5 payments. One of them was for $2,000, the other one was for $2,000, another one for $3,000, another one for $1,000, so on and so forth. And that report will also show you exactly which tenant within which unit and which lease made that payment and the date that they initiated their payment, versus when it deposited into your bank account. Now, the following report that I had you favorite was your rent roll. And your rent roll is pretty much just going to show you general information for your portfolio across the board. So it'll sort it by property and it'll tell you all the units within those properties, the leases within them, the tenants residing in them. You can add that as well. And just general information like lease terms, beds, bath, size, rent, deposits, and the current balance on those leases. And then at the end here, you have transactions list by type. Easy enough. This is a report that shows you all your transactions across the board. Now, why I find this report specifically useful is at the top, you have a blank option that says type. If you go ahead and click on type, it'll let you select which type of transaction you're trying to view. So for example, if I wanted to view a list of all the expenses that I have posted within DoorLoop so far, I can go ahead and scroll down a little bit and select expense. Now, as you can see, this report is auto defaulting to expenses that have been recorded within the last 7 days. If I wanted to go ahead and make it to a different time period, I can go ahead and click on this drop down and it'll show me a list of all pre-made time periods on here, and I can select them from here. If you wanted to manually customize the time period on here, you can adjust the start date on here and the end date as well to your liking. And now this is showing me all the expenses that have occurred from the beginning of January until today's date. And I can see them on here. This is also going to be useful for any payments that you have received so far. So if I were to swap this over to payments, now I can see a list of all the payments that I've received so far within DoorLoop. And this will apply to all payments, whether they were made online or whether they were manually recorded in here as well. If I select all time, just for the sake of showing you guys more payments on here, you can see a list of a bunch of payments on here. Now, by default, you won't have this payment method drop down on there, or this column better said. In order to add it, you can click on the 3 dots on the right, and you can select which columns you would like to show and which ones you would like to hide from here. So if I select payment method, now DoorLoop lets me know exactly what payment method was used in order to record this payment. If it was one that you manually recorded, it'll let you know what you chose. If it was a payment online through the portal, then it will say ePay instead. So this report will be very useful for that. Final note on your reporting within DoorLoop. As I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and swap the time period to your liking. All of your reports will have a filter option over here at the top left. It'll be in blue. When you go ahead and click on that filter, you will go ahead and see a list of different filter settings for that report. Your filter options will be different on a report by report basis. So not all reports will have the same options on there. And it's simply because they don't each show the same exact information. So you will see different options on here, but you can filter by property, by lease, by portfolio, owner, vendor, so on and so forth. The other thing to note about reports is what I mentioned earlier. You can click on the 3 dots on the right to add or remove columns from this list. You can also move the order of the columns around if you would like to. So for example, if I wanted the payment method to be towards the beginning, I can move this over here and DoorLoop will make that adjustment for me. And now it's over here. And final note on your reports, all of your reports can be exported. So you will have these 2 options on the right-hand side for you to go ahead and choose how you would like to export those reports. The option on the left allows you to export it into a spreadsheet, and the option on the right allows you to either save it as a PDF or print it out to your local printer. And that is pretty much it. That is the accounting and bookkeeping side of DoorLoop. Thank you guys for staying on for this session. And now we will go ahead and take any questions that you guys have. We'll have an open floor for questions for the next 10 minutes or so.